Welcome to the Society for the New Humanist Paradigm Saturday meeting on the 9th of September 2017. Okay, so I'm going to introduce tonight by telling you that yesterday Lyndon LaRouche celebrated his 95th birthday. And 95 years ago, a individual was born into the world that began later on a movement 52 years ago, roughly 1965, and 66. And later his wife coined the directionality of the orientation of that movement. She called it the New Humanist Paradigm. Now, it was based on the breakthroughs that LaRouche made in physical economics in the early 50s, 1950s. And the political movement that emerged in 65, 66 was to counter what LaRouche saw was a fascist tendency within the 68er youth rebellion, college rebellion that was going on. An anti-working class. It was an anti-working class tendency in the youth movement. And now, today we see the new paradigm in the policies of Putin and Xi Jinping. And an example of this is recently what Putin did in Vladivostok, just completed in Vladivostok, at the Far East Economic Forum, where one, he called for a bridge to connect the Sakhalin Island with Hokkaido, which I believe also means connecting them through the Kura Islands. I believe that they're on a string there. And he's calling for a policy of developing North Korea with involving China, South Korea, Russia, and China, and Japan. Now, the fact that there's now a policy discussion, policy proposal to bring Japan into a physical contact through a bridge with Russia is that there is this organizing process going on of bringing using economic development as a way of resolving these problems that have been left over from World War II and from ever since World War II on, the end of World War II on. And this is the new paradigm. This is the proposed method that Lyndon LaRouche, back in the 70s, late 70s, called peace through development. And what Lyndon LaRouche always says is, do not go for a political solution when you have parties which are being kept in constant conflict. Go for economic development, and then that can lead to a political solution. And that is exactly what the Chinese are doing, and that's exactly what Putin is doing. And their whole approach to the North Korean situation is that they want to bring North Korea in economically, because the ability to connect up South Korea through North Korea to Russia and China and Japan is the key to the massive development of that very productive potential region. And it's also the key of bringing in the vast interior of eastern Russia, Siberia, into the economic process in terms of raw materials, timber, oil, everything else. So this is the way out for this. And the idea is that by tying North Korea into these economic arrangements, you essentially end this condition. Now, parenthetically, this idea was proposed to Bill Clinton in terms of dealing with the North Korean crisis back in the early 90s, 1994, and a deal was made with North Korea involving peace through development. And that deal was then wrecked by Bush and Obama. And the reason they wrecked the agreement and the deal and became very hostile to Korea, to North Korea, and then forced the South Korean government to abandon their economic development policy with North Korea, was that they wanted to have a reason, a threat emerged from North Korea to have a reason to build this THAAD missile system and the ABM system that would allow them to deploy a forward first strike, stopping a second strike capability, which has been the policy since Bush came into office, George Bush Jr., and the neocons took over, has been the policy to create a capable threat to win a nuclear war with Russia and China. That's been there.
But first strike capability is the main driver.
Yeah, and that's what they wanted to have, to essentially force these countries to surrender to the neoliberal system, the international neoliberal system. But that was the reason that Iran was also maintained as a threat, so that they could say that the reason they have to build these systems in Europe is because of Iran's possibility of Iran developing. So this whole thing with the nuclear threat, and all of this has been used to play this game. But now, it's not going to work because, to some degree, the moment of military opportunity to be in a position to put that together, to be able, although they're putting these things in place, they're reaching a point where the combination of factors, they're reaching a point where they no longer are going to be able to have that capability. And therefore, on the one end, there has to be, you have a mess that they created as a result that has to be dealt with. And the Trump administration has had back-channel discussions with the North Koreans, and they have discovered in the back-channel discussions, as has been admitted, that the North Koreans do not ever intend to not develop the capability to have at least one ICBM hit a major target in the United States as the insurance for staying afloat, for keeping the U.S. from attacking them, or keeping the system. So what does this mean? This means that the Trump administration can do nothing about this, except negotiate directly with North Korea, recognize them, end the sanctions, and then work from there. And there's no reason otherwise why they wouldn't do that, except for the hysteria that's been created in the United States and the hysteria that's been created generally. So the other thing that happened is based on the same paradigm, is that 5 nations came to participate in the BRICS Summit: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These were Egypt, Kenya, Tajikistan, Mexico, and Thailand. So this is very big because these countries are now being recruited. They're not in the BRICS, but they're being recruited into a process involving the BRICS. Now, so whether it's the crocodile in Thailand, or the One Belt, One Road policy of China, or the Transaqua policy, these were all policies that were put forward in the beginning in the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s. These were put forward singularly by Helga and Lyndon LaRouche and the movement. They are now part of the future of humanity. They're for real, there's motion to get them. And why? Because if you're going to develop, these are the things that you're going to have to do. And that includes the Oasis Plan in the Middle East, which will now become part of the One Belt, One Road. The Oasis Plan that LaRouche originally proposed, and there were a lot of supporters in Egypt, there were some in Israel, there were some in the US government from the late 70s. It never occurred for many different reasons, which I won't go into. Now comes under the One Belt, One Road, or the Belt and Road Initiative. So in that context, you have the problem of the United States. And the system in the United States is totally negative, economically and otherwise, towards such an orientation. The power that has run the United States has been totally opposed to this. Although there are forces in the United States that have supported it and have memory of LaRouche's policies and have memory of supporting LaRouche's policies at various times. But you have, and then in all of this, you have this all-out attack on Donald Trump, largely because he has no allegiance to the program, the neoliberal program of conquering Russia and China. He has no allegiance to that policy. He is not, he has his own ego, he has his own ideas, he has his own issues, whether good or bad. And he is going to be a problem. So they're trying to get rid of him, or they're trying to destroy him, or they're trying to prevent him from being able to have a functioning government. And so what has happened in the last 2 weeks on this account is very profound. What's happened is the following. First, you had the Harvey hurricane hit Houston, hit that Texas area. Now, people have to understand that that area is the vital port area of the United States. 8 of the 12 ports in tonnage, in size of tonnage, are in that area. The top 2 are in that area, the Louisiana port and the Houston port. And there are 6 others in that area that are within the top 12. This is where the Mississippi, the Missouri comes into the Mississippi, comes down the Mississippi, the Ohio comes into the Mississippi. There's a connection into the Great Lakes. This is the principal waterway transportation artery of the United States that comes out of this area. This is also where 20 to 30% of all of the chemical and petrochemical and industries are based. This is where the oil shipments come in. This is where the refinery occurs. This is where it gets shipped to the East Coast, and so on and so forth. Now, the history of the United States economically, prior to the railway development, and even after the railway development, as any region, has a very strong relationship to the development of the internal waterways. Okay. To the development of flood control systems, to the development of irrigation systems, to the development of sewage systems, to the development of drainage systems. The hydrology of a civilization is one of the most critical factors of whether you're going to have a civilization, period. Water is the essence of everything: transportation, manufacturing, hygiene,
agriculture.
Everything, agriculture, everything. Okay, and being able to manage and control the rivers, prevent the damages of storms, control the rain, everything is related to, you have to have massive infrastructure for this. And when you go 50 years without improving it or without adding to it, and you become antiquated infrastructure, this is a form of criminal negligence on profound, and the U.S. has been increasingly involved in a financial and political way in extreme forms of criminal negligence. So this disaster that occurred in Houston is to a large degree a man-made disaster. Everything that happened there was foretold. Okay. It was foretold for Katrina, it was foretold later at Sandy, and the devastation of New Orleans, the devastation of New York, has not been fully recovered from. And when your society is not able, for internal reasons, to improve or expand or create the means to maintain these systems, then you are essentially not fit for survival, historically and currently. And so this crisis has caused a profound situation in the United States, and then you have these other two hurricanes coming in, which are going to hit very hard as well. And the overwhelming effect of these will have is kind of a wake-up call. Now, the Trump administration and Donald Trump has reacted in the most as much as they can, to the fullest extent. And the people are not operating from the standpoint that they have been abandoned by the government the way they did at Katrina or the way they did elsewhere. So the Trump administration has been able to organize the military, the volunteers, the Cajun Navy, put this all together so that at least the people are involved in this process. And so there is a feeling of a unity that supersedes the Charlottesville business and also supersedes the whole Russiagate business. So this is very important, and in this context, you had the first cooperation between the Democratic leadership in the House and Senate and Donald Trump. And during this period, or just prior, the House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi was saying that this anti-Trump stuff had to stop because the people who voted for Trump were taking it as a personal attack from the Democratic Party. And a lot of the people who voted for Trump are Democrats, who they need to vote Democratic in the local races. They don't need to piss them off to the point that they're just going to not vote for any Democrats at the local races. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure coming from the local political apparatuses in the various states saying, look, we got to get these people elected from our local districts. We got to get these people elected. And a lot of these people that don't traditionally vote for us are voted for Trump. And now you're making it hard for us to be able to get our people elected, because a lot of times Americans will vote party line at the local level, but they will break from the party line at the national level. This happens a lot, and especially at the presidential level. So you have the shift taking place that's not consolidated, where finally the Democratic leadership is now talking to the Trump administration about collaboration, first on the money for the disaster, but it has potential to go beyond that. The ability to maintain this hysterical anti-Trump environment within the Democratic Party has now, it looks like it has broken to some degree. Okay, so that's all I can say on that. Now, just to reinforce this concept of I guess you could call it hydrology. Many scholars have referred to China as the hydraulic civilization. Okay. What they mean by that is that the Chinese society and its increased population has been, to some degree, based on massive water projects, canals, flood control projects, flood and combination irrigation projects. There's one very famous irrigation project in a part of China that was built in 256 BC that's still functioning. It's still working. It's a flood control. It's a flood control irrigation project, and it's very ingenious. I didn't quite understand the architecture of it, and by 600 AD, they had built a canal from where Beijing is now, past Shanghai to where Hangzhou is now. And this canal connected all the Yellow and the Yangtze River so that stuff could go through the Yangtze River, up the canal to the Yellow River, and it was an incredible thing. And I think they had something, a continuous, 10 to 20,000 barges or more were continually in operation, bringing grain from the south, north, and so forth and so on. So this is a huge system, and it also, a lot of it involved irrigation. And the period when the dynasties were moving forward and population was increasing, it was because they were spending a tremendous amount of their effort in maintaining and developing these water projects. But when they abandoned that, eventually these things started to collapse, and then you began to have more disasters, or you weren't able to deal with the disasters, and you would have, at some points, total collapse of Chinese civilization, and then they would have to start over again and rebuild. So this is not completely rebuild, but build upon what had been done before. So this is a very important aspect of a civilization, and it's a marker of whether your society is functional or not. And right now, the U.S. is in deep trouble because so now in this context, Trump had a meeting with the leadership, with the delegation, some of the delegation of senator and governor and congressmen from New York and New Jersey on the Gateway project to build the tunnels that are required, and most of all to replace a bridge that was condemned 5 years ago, on which 10% of the GNP of the United States goes over that bridge. It goes from Florida to New England, and it's the most important bridge over this area, and it's 5 years past its point when it should have been taken down and a new one built. So these are the kind of things that are forcing the issue of eliminating or getting rid of the international financial system and restoring a sovereign credit system in the United States. And we are moving with everything we can to put that on the table. Okay, and we're doing this. And we're going to be hitting Congress and Congress again and Congress again and the state legislatures again. And we're going to be doing this with the policies, because that's what is required. And the potential now exists because there's greater potential for these policies among the Democrats than the current crop of Republicans. So, and therefore, if the Democrats are going to be in a position to dialogue with Trump, then Trump and then the Democrats might respond. There's more room to move in this now that the Democrats are now speaking to Trump, but that doesn't mean that it will happen that way. Now, our intervention at the United BC Municipalities Conference has a similar quality of putting these ideas forward as a way of how Canada is going to have to deal with the blowback from an international financial crisis that we're expecting. We're expecting. And so now, not to be outdone, the bumbling idiots of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and their dirty little underside of things are busy at work in trying to find whatever they can among the Russian residences and Russian consulates and so forth and so on. And this is another provocation towards Russia by the anti-Russian crowd. And whether Trump went along with it for whatever reason is one thing. But nonetheless, this is just an example of something which in the future will be seen as a very as incredibly stupid, because the Russia gate is dying. And today we had a major conference in New York on it, on the Russia. We had the two top people, Bill Benny and Ray McGovern, and they were at a conference, and I don't know who was there or what was going on, but we're putting an end to the whole Russia thing. The Russia thing is being just put down at this time in the United States. So I didn't have much to say. I'll go ahead and open it up for questions, or anybody have anything to say.
Did you get any response back on the legislation on search and seizure warrant in Maryland, DC?
Okay, I looked into it. I sent you an email on it.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, but when I looked into it, I had a different interpretation than the people who were alarmed have of what had happened. Okay, what it was is that, from what I could tell, from what I could discern, I could be wrong, is that the local governments of Maryland, the DC, District of Columbia administration, and Virginia are very pissed off at the way the federal government was handling the mass transit system that essentially is in all three areas. And so what they did is they got the Congress to pass a bill that allowed them to set up a
security zone,
an administrative capability separate from the Federal Transit Authority, and in that set up a separate policing structure from the federal government. And they wanted the right to have total control over and access over the areas where the transit systems were over, plus the immediate adjacent properties. And the bill specifies that this agency has the power to enter federal property without a warrant. Now, the question is, what are the types of things that they would be interested in prosecuting? It would be things involving the safety of the transit system. It wouldn't be like the federal government looking into your thing. That's how I interpret it. Now, however, even so slightly a change is a slippery slope. So there's that issue, which is why 5 congressmen voted against it. But when you told me the story, I thought that they were setting up a system to go into anybody's house in Virginia or large areas of Virginia. This is not a large area. These are just the immediate adjacent properties to the transportation.
Yeah, it's in the corridor. I mentioned it's the metro corridor, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not the same thing as I can go over here or go over there or go over here or go over there. So my reading of it, just from my ignorant reading of it, is that there's some kind of conflict between the federal government and the local governments, and that this is them trying to get control from the federal government of this whole process. That's my reading of it.
You're saying that the Russiagate phenomenon is, in your opinion, beginning to collapse.
Yes.
But I think we recognize that Russiagate was a fabrication that was thrown up for a particular purpose. I guess to defend to defend Clinton against the embarrassment of having to accept her defeat, etc., and maybe more.
Much so.
So could you just comment on that?
Sure.
That tool, Russiagate, is
Yes.
collapsing. So what happens to the powers that want to put it up in the first place?
the reason is goes far beyond giving a plausible reason for Hillary. It had far beyond. Okay, if you can keep the tension and hostility built up between Russia and the United States, okay, and keep them from collaborating with each other, that's the purpose. Because what happens when Russia and the United States collaborate on issues of mutual interest? What happens? There goes international terrorism. And then the bigger one. Russia doesn't like having drugs, or people being drugged up. Why don't we work together and shut down the drug trade? Who's going to stop us? But as long as Russia and the United States are at odds with one another, right, you have play. You have a lot of play in this thing. It becomes massive on many different levels. Oh, what's in our interest? What's in your interest? As soon as you start to do that, the other thing is that once you do that, then the discussion between Russia and the United States, and you bring China in, that three-way discussion determines policies for the world. That's what they're afraid of. And then India comes in, and then when you bring India in, you have a four-way discussion about what's in the interest of the four major nations, the four most powerful nations. What's in the interest of those four powerful? You no longer have the divide and conquer system. You know that's gone. Now,
So it was to support the unipolar world,
right.
which is
But the unipolar world is also a world of division. Multipolar world means you no longer have that kind of us versus them structure.
yeah.
So that's huge. And every indication is that if left to himself, Trump would gravitate in that direction. And that's the big threat that Trump represents. It's not that it's that he might gravitate in that situation. And if he does, what does that mean? That means an end to the unipolar world, or an end to the nuclear war, or an end to a lot of things. And then they can solve a lot of problems together. They can work together. And that is what Putin wants. That is what Putin wants. That's what China wants the United States to do.
Maybe you could speak about the response of Putin to the movement on their embassies and all of their people's homes and stuff. It's quite
This
interesting
is
how.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Instead of getting all huffy and puffy about it, he said, we're going to challenge this illegal act in the courts of the United States, and we will discover whether the courts of the United States have any principles left. So this is, so basically, Putin is saying, we're going to appeal to the law of the United States. Now, how important, so this is brilliant. I mean, this is a brilliant move on his part, because he's actually calling into question your own integrity as a nation, your own thing. And I love Lavrov, the foreign minister. I read it, I had a subtitle translation of one of his presentations from quite a while ago. I think it's before the election. And he said, there are two parties in the United States. He said, there's the party of war and the party of sanctions. He didn't say there was a good party. He said there's a party of war and there's a party of sanctions. And we're going to keep negotiating. And we're going to keep our military presence in Syria. And he said, sooner or later, the people in Washington are gonna have to realize that what they're doing doesn't work. And then they will talk to us. And that may be a long time, but but what I really loved about him is this idea of patience, of being patient.
Yeah.
Of not, of being patient and understanding. And it is very good. Go ahead.
Yes, the patience, his faith in his own patience implies that he believes time is on his side.
Yes.
But there seems to be the insurmountable barrier of the mainstream media blanket of all the good stuff that is happening, that you've been discussing, that we saw on the video and so on. Could you give us your impression of the degree to which that is a 100% blanket in the U.S.?
I can give you a sense of my own experience in the streets of the suburbs and of Seattle and in other places. Okay. A significant part of the population of the United States, I don't know what percentage, 30% maybe more, they have rejected the mainstream media outright. They call it the fake news. It used to be the fake news where the conspiracy files and the websites and all of that, it was all called fake news. Now they don't say that, it's the mainstream media is fake news. And Trump did that. Trump did that at a press conference. He called CNN the fake news. And ever since then, everyone out there in the population is calling the regular media the fake news. And what did the fake news say? Okay? And the fake news said this. And so, what's the fake news saying? And that's become a common expression throughout the
What's fake news say?
Not among everybody. And then, I tell you, it wasn't supposed to be that way. It was the other people that were the fake news, right? It was people like us. We were the fake news. Okay. Now, the other thing that's happened is that, what was I going to say? Oh, yes. I was going to say this before that. There's reports that Vladimir Putin has the patience of a saint. And the Russian Orthodox Church is waiting for him to die so they can
Make him a saint.
so that they can make him into a saint. Anyhow, so that's really what's going on. It's really, and a lot of the people who do the news, I mean, they have really gone downhill. And I mean, it's like, and Donald Trump has no respect for them. I mean, he shows absolutely no respect for any of these people, and that's very important because it's when you respect these people that you have problems. They show no respect, and so they go ahead and do it, but it's not changing the actual perception of a large part of the population who have this is a big change in the U.S. But it has not consolidated into a positive direction, fully yet a positive direction, and that's what we have to do. But it is changed. And I mean, how many people in Canada believe that your news is fake news compared to how many people in the U.S. believe that the news is fake? Well, probably quite a few Canadians, but probably nowhere near probably